Welcome to another episode of VNture podcast, your weekly source of all things visual novel. I am Amar, and together with Tauros, we shall venture into another discussion about VNs. Today we want to talk about exciting, extraordinary, and completely surreal genre that is slice of life? Wait, is that correct? Episode 13 really is cursed, huh? Well, Tauros, please introduce us to what exactly is a slice of life.
Hello. Yes, slice of life is a very common term for visual novels that describes what most people consider normal daily lives, such as going to school, talking to friends, going to the store, just commonplace, peaceful times. So usually that's what people mean when they talk about it. According to VNDB, the visual novel database, it defines slice of life story as the everyday life of ordinary people, sometimes with fantasy or science fiction elements involved. That last part about fantasy or science fiction is interesting because a lot of people consider slice of life synonymous with the soft, relaxing moege, where it's just hanging out with cute girls and just very laid-back stories. But that's not entirely true, according to VNDB, and that's an interesting approach I wanted to consider with it, is that slice of life is more of just story events, just going through a normal daily life of the main characters, even if their lives aren't all that similar to yours or mine. One obvious example was Fate's Day Night, which is supposed to be an action visual novel with all sorts of dark themes and plot twists and whatnot. And yet, that VN is notorious for having a whole bunch of cooking scenes, where it's just the main characters cooking and eating dinner and talking about their day. There's plenty of scenes where they go to school, too, and they talk to their friends while they're kind of considering how their Holy Grail War is building up and how they're going to fight all their opponents and stuff. But it's still, in contrast with their normal high school daily lives.
Yep.
So basically, even when you have these different genres, like fantasy or action or sci-fi, you can still have slice of life segments, right?
I mean, I need to confront the definition first, but yeah, I agree with you, because for the longest time, I really thought slice of life is grounded in reality, first and foremost. So the relatability is the main tenet of slice of life. Therefore, as effect of that, I did stray away from slice of life. Whenever slice of life is purely realistic, purely set firmly in reality, and oh god, in high school settings, I snooze off. I can't. Be it anime, be it light novels, be it visual novels, I just can't deal with that. So it's actually very interesting that you bring up the definition from VNDB specifically, because in that definition itself, it's shown that it's broader than just reality and relatability. It can be an everyday life of everyday people mixed in with surreal and fantastical elements. Wasn't something I internalized at start.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I know the most common case is high school romance with cute girls, because that's what you usually see, That's what most people like to read. That's what a lot of publishing companies put out. And so that's just what people like you and I assumed.
Yeah.
But that's not always the case. And, in looking over some of the titles I've read and the things I'm interested in, there's a lot of times where I've thought, oh, hey, there's a whole bunch of titles I've read that are slice of life that I really wouldn't have considered that. Kind of same with you, too, how you mentioned how you're kind of fed up with it. But, it extends more than just, normal relatability.
Yeah. I think some of the titles early on that I read convinced me of that, the groundedness of slice of life. So since I wasn't...
Oh, like which ones?
I'm trying to remember, was it Kira Kira? Was it Teardrops? The old Overflow titles, for example. Maybe
nice.
School Days. Those kind of deals. And I just... No. the setting itself just made it so boring for me, so I just strayed away from those. But I think I got pulled in back to this genre whenever the slice of life elements crept into a genre I played. So, given a setting that is, let's say, post-apocalyptic survival kind of deal, which is Karakara, that's the setting, and then the daily struggles of how to live life in that kind of environment crept in. So slice of life is kind of a part of that setting, even though I would be very hard pressed to describe it as slice of life. Yet, those elements do exist, and then I had to think, at the very least, in my opinion, they do exist there, and then I had to think, maybe there is something more in slice of life. Maybe I should give it another chance, even though it's saturated very heavily with the themes and settings I don't really see. I mean, they don't really interest me, so... But I gave it another chance.
Because you mentioned before you really like world building and the big greater themes about how society functions and all of that. And so if there's any slice of life titles where you get I guess you could say a first person view of this stuff in a fantasy setting, I'm sure you'd be more receptive to that than normal high school stuff, right?
Exactly. And to this day, I cannot explain. I do not know why Princess Evangel is the title I enjoyed reading, despite it being the most pure slice of life I've ever read. With no fantastical elements whatsoever. I don't know why that one in particular worked with me and no other did.
It was so good it made you a believer, huh?
Yeah. Exception that proven the rule. Something like that.
In my case, there was one title that did the same to me, and that was Machikoi. A good friend recommended it to me, Super Ange. He's an awesome guy. And so even though I'm not a slice of life fan, and I wouldn't really say I'm a comedy fan either, here's this one visual novel of a high school where martial arts are emphasized, including duels and whatnot. And so it's just the story of this one normal high schooler and his band of friends as they have a whole bunch of fun in high school. And so the premise didn't sound anything interesting, but I've heard so many good things about it. And finally, it's like, okay, I'll check it out. And on the one hand, it does fit the mold of the typical slice of life shenanigans of normal high school daily life, hanging out with friends, and then, getting a girlfriend too, and all of the struggles involved in that. But it's so hilarious. All of the characters are just ridiculously over the top, and all the conversations they have are full of life and jokes. It really, when people say they like these slice of life stories because it takes them back to an earlier time in their life, Machikoi was a VN that really showed how true that was.
I see.
In this one, I could really see how it was like reliving the highlights of, an earlier time in your life. It's I wonder if part of the problem is that it's not really a title you can advertise well, because on the face of it, nothing really stands out about it. Just like you mentioned with Princess Evangel. It's a title that just does what it does so spectacularly, with so much humor and so much life in the characters, and later on so much drama involved, that it's like, oh my goodness, I could just start I could reload a save file at any point and just watch like an hour fly by as I read through the same stuff. And for anyone out there who loves slice of life, or even, those of you who might not care for these themes, I would totally recommend Magikoi over anything else. I loved it, man.
Yeah, but I'm actually curious with one thing you said in particular, reliving the best highlights from the past. Does that mean it's still an easy recommendation for a person who didn't have those highlights? Or do you think it's such a self-insert kind of situation you could revisit the parts you have missed on in your high school life, let's say?
I think both can apply.
Okay.
Obviously, if you've gone through some of those events and you have good memories of the past, this can serve as nostalgia bait, sort of. I think that's usually the term people will sometimes criticize it for.
Sure.
But hey, it's the reader reading a work and their experiences with it and how much they enjoy their time with a visual novel is most important,
Fair enough.
It's on the personal level. And if they don't have a good time in high school, for example, in this case, then I don't think there's anything wrong in, reliving it through someone else's experience. Because at the end of the day, a visual novel is a story.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to deliver emotions.
Sure. Yeah.
And however the reader feels is the most important part. And so if it gives you a whole bunch of, happy laughs and sad moments and angry moments too, where you're rooting for the good guys, then that's the important part. And I think that's something Magikoi handles very well.
Yeah, I'm just curious, is that effect amplified through the pink tinted glasses, let's say, if you were a part of, let's say, that fulfilling high school life? So then you go back to those days through anime aesthetic, let's say.
Well, I don't know how many people went through high school with an older sister figure who kicked everyone's asses.
Point
So
taken.
I don't know about that.
Point taken.
I think there are a lot of people out there who wish they did, though, so eat your hearts out.
Was it Magikoi that does the title with one character in particular you liked once you got on her route? Do I remember that correctly?
Yes, Wonko. I didn't have any particular favorites as I read the story. It's just a case of I really liked everyone involved.
Sure.
But Wonko's route was incredible for many reasons that I won't really go into detail about because of spoilers.
Oh, fair.
But definitely following the events in her route, she was a favorite character of mine.
Yeah, I mean...
On that note, by the way... Oh, yeah, sorry, unless you want to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that... the fact that you like all the characters is definitely a good selling mark. I know a lot of titles on the top of my head that were, even if, let's say, something I value, so world building, wasn't that great, if you made characters lovable, likable enough, it could carry the entire story on its shoulders. So that's definitely a good selling point.
I agree. Yeah, the characters carry the story in every visual novel. Speaking of the characters, one thing I've always wondered with slice of life titles, and especially with the stereotype of them being moeges.
Yeah.
When they start off, they always seem to be lighthearted, and you get to know the characters, and you have happy events. And then, near the end, or especially in character routes, that's when the conflict starts building up, right?
Fair.
Either interpersonal, or an antagonist character, or whatever else the story brings. It's usually in the end, once you get attached to the characters, that suddenly now something is threatening everyone's happiness. And now this is the conflict that you have to resolve that carries you to the climax.
Yeah, that's true.
So that goes hand in hand with you saying how much you like the characters and how that's important.
I mean,
because after all, if you don't like the characters and you don't care what happens to them, that doesn't bode well for the story, huh?
Yeah, but that's a balancing act, right? If you introduce drama too early, then the reader won't care because he's not, or he or she isn't invested enough in the story and characters. So there's a reason a lot of drama and intense moments are pushed back. It's not easy to front load all of those problems. So
Magicoi definitely did that too. For anyone else who might be interested, you should totally read it. But that's how much I like that. Even though I wouldn't say I'm a fan of Slice of Life, Magicoi is definitely a diamond out there.
Yeah.
Do you have anything like that, MR?
Yes. One that I mentioned before was Princess Evangel, but the one that I prepared specifically for today is Saku Saku. Or for this, I guess, introduction to this title, I might as well say the entire title. Saku Saku, Love Blooms with the Cherry Blossoms. And
it's a long name.
Oh, it is a long name. It's a slice of life, high school romance story about a student who listens to love problems from girls at his school. And he gives them advice on love. Well, this boosts his popularity and even places a bounty on its head, or I guess I should say heart. The twist is, having heard all those love troubles from other people made him steadfast in not finding love. He's a logical person. He's not going to succumb to emotions. I mean, if this would be all there is here, I mean, we wouldn't have much of a slice of life romance, would we, right? So, the game introduces a love fairy to his life, which is totally legit fairy and not a bit sketchy as we see currently on the screen on the screenshots. And now the story truly begins. The protagonist's daily life turned into maelstrom of hijinks, both mundane and supernatural. And this, probably more so than any other title, convinced me there's a place for outwardly elements in Slice of Life. And probably that's why I liked it so much. Aesthetic aside, I really enjoy how they, I wouldn't say excused, but they made a good reason why the supernatural things are happening. And again, in the interest of spoiler, I'm not going to say why and how, but the story itself is told in such a way that the fantastical and mundane intersect really nicely. And for those people who know me, how I rate visual novels, they always get +1 point if I see bugs of characters. And that game specifically have some sprites of characters in different poses from different perspectives, including from the bugs. So this shows care and attention to details. And that's another point for this title. Holy heck, this looks beautiful. The aesthetics are phenomenal.
You can see in some of these screenshots going by on the screen, some of them are animated too, like falling cherry blossoms and some characters blinking in the CGs.
Yep.
There is a lot of care put into it, right?
Yes, exactly. And that's why I was very peculiar about picking those screenshots and I guess GIFs on those animated segments to showcase as much as possible how overwhelmingly aesthetic that game was at times. And how all of that contributed and in a way clashed with a steadfast, logical, no emotion, no love allowed kind of product, which was hilarious in it of itself.
So in a way, you were mentioning the main conflict in romance of you have this guy who's very familiar with romance, but he's a very straight-laced, logical kind of protagonist. And now you have this weird fairy thing trying to lead him to love, right?
Yeah, because it's the main central conflict, like you're describing, is a Protac who is disillusioned with romance in general, again, from his experience, third person listening to other people's problems, and thinking logically, he says, I don't want to have those problems, so I'll stay away. And then he meets someone outside of logic from fantastical land who tries to convince him, yes, give it a chance, it's worth it, despite it being problematic and based upon erratic emotions at times. So the challenge is, how do you bridge logical barriers of a person steadfast of not loving other people? Like that's actually a really interesting concept. And again, intertwined with all those fantastical elements running in the background, I thought it was a really good mix.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of, you're talking about the fantastical elements, and you're talking about the drama involved in this main character, but it's still a slice of life title, right?
Yes.
You still say that it's primarily made up of people living their normal lives. In this case, like you mentioned, normal high school, right?
Yep, exactly. Just the daily struggles, and one of the core points is how not to make the fantastical interfere with your daily life. So Protac wanted his peaceful daily life to continue as normal, whereas the love fairy wanted to put a bit of chaos and romantic element to his life wherever he goes. So that was the sort of turbulence in his life, and that made for a very enjoyable read, in my opinion.
Oh, hey, glad you liked it.
Yep.
I do have to say, though, Steam says that I have read Saku Saku for about 2.5 hours. And I believe it, because I tried reading it once, and I could not read it for more than like 15 minutes at a time. I know you've been praising the aesthetic so much. In my case, though, it is too overbearing. It's too much bright pink and pastel colors and very super anime aesthetics, and it was too much for me.
I get it.
I'm not a slice of life fan, so I kind of got dropped into this without any prior experience.
Sure.
And my poor eyes were drowning in sweetness.
I get it. Probably this is why I got hooked. Is quite early they introduced the love fairy character, and I was just curious, what's the deal, right? So I really, really wanted to investigate what's the fuss about, where she's from, what's the deal here. And I understand those aesthetics can be overwhelming because there's super in your face, especially with all those animations fluttering about, all the eyelids being animated. And let it be known, for the record on this podcast, this title was too pink for Tauros, okay? Even as edgy as I am in those titles I read, I managed to I managed to conquer this amount of pink.
Ouch! Yeah, you've got that one over me.
So yeah, but yeah, I had fun memories.
It's funny that you. Yeah, I know, and it's funny I just mentioned it, but you got sucked in by the world building, huh?
Yeah.
It's like, I must know more about this strange character.
Yes, I can't sleep. I must know where Grim Reapers are first, or those fantastical creatures are from. Why are here? What's the deal?
Aye. Okay. Saku Saku has multiple routes, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I know you keep mentioning the one character a lot. Does that mean you weren't as interested in all the other, I guess you could say, normal high school girls involved?
It's not that I wasn't interested, because they were characters in themselves. I saw some clicked more with me than others. Fair enough. Still, the most intriguing part to me was the deal with Fairy. right? That's the central hook, let's say. I would say, yeah, I really enjoyed the romance endings. They were very, let's say, the kind I liked. So, if I remember correctly, there were no bad endings, so it's a good sign for me. There were only... I'm trying to remember. I think I had some problems with one of the heroine. The central drama was basically revolving around them being too good of a couple, which I found like being super arbitrary reason for a drama and split up, something like that. I felt like that was kind of weird.
Yeah, that sounds a little weird, yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember the specifics. I just remember that was the central conflict. But the rest was exactly as you described with Magikoi. After getting acquainted with those characters, when you enter their routes, there is some sort of conflict or drama within that. Maybe it's a conflict with parents. Maybe you need to prove yourself. Maybe you need to undo some misunderstanding. Those kind of deals. Maybe there's a character that is related to that character and there is a love triangle that developed. Something like that. Mm-hmm. And maybe there is even something more to the fantastical elements I'm not going to talk about, right?
Yep. No spoilers. If you want to find out more, you gotta read it yourself.
Exactly. And I didn't know I'm going to say such a word. I cannot recommend it enough. A slice of life title. Oh, but there is first for everything, I guess.
Oh, yeah. First for everything. But hey, it stands up pretty good.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It stands true. And with all of that, so what's your next topic that you would like to talk about?
I know you mentioned you really like this. There's another title I liked that would count as slice of life in a very different genre than these past two, called Valhalla. Cyberpunk bartender action.
Oh yeah, what a title it was.
Yes, it takes place in the future. Main character is a bartender at some hole-in-the-wall bar. And most of this visual novel just takes place from her perspective as customers come in and she makes them drinks and they just talk about whatever's going on in their life. Usually, it's just the customers, complaining about their lives or just having fun talking, bringing their friends and whatnot. And you can hear there's a lot of socio-political issues going on outside in, the world at large and stuff happening. But you never really learn about it how other visual novels would handle it, such as in an info dump, or you're the hero and you've got to save the world from all of that. No, in Valhalla, you're just a bystander and stuff is happening and you just hear about it piecemeal.
Yeah.
From the customers.
Often from customers, sometimes from news articles. And I liked how topical sometimes the broadcast in the background, because you are in the bar. Obviously, there is a TV screen of some sort running in the background. And sometimes the TV flickers with an image related to the current events, exactly like in a bar it would be.
It does. It feels lively, and even though you never see the outside world for yourself, it still feels connected in your own little way.
That title was so great. When I was reading that, I set out two objectives for myself. I need to get to know as much as possible what's going on with the world itself, what's happening, and I need to understand each and every customer. And boy, oh boy, there are some crazy ones there, okay?
There's a lot of crazy people who come in.
Yes, and I pride myself that I finished on my blind playthrough with, if I remember, I had everybody maxed out with all the customers, all their drinks. I didn't get the secrets, because those were super convoluted. But at the very least, I maxed out all the customers. It's
On a blind playthrough?
Yes.
Nice, okay.
But yeah, it took a lot of care to understand each and every one of them, especially when customers come in that relate to other customers, and then you need to keep track of who knows who, what they like, what they talk about. Oh god.
For a visual novel where you just make people drinks, it gets surprisingly difficult to track.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, and I do want to mention though that Valhalla definitely is a slice of life title.
Yes.
Even though it's the furthest thing from the norm of what people expect, you still see normal daily life from the main character's point of view as she just shows up to work every day.
Yes, she's an ordinary bartender in the ordinary bar, serving maybe not so ordinary people sometimes, but yeah. It's the daily struggles of bartender, and it shows, probably a little bit exaggerated, how they deal with customers and grow to like them and know them.
You mentioned earlier on when I was talking about Majikoi about how relatable something needed to be to really get that emotional connection. And I mean, something like Valhalla, I don't think it's relatable at all. Much that, number one, obviously it takes place in the future and it's sci-fi. And number two, I don't think many people have any experience bartending. So in a way, this whole story and all the experiences aren't relatable for many readers at all. But still, you can read it and enjoy it for what it is, even if it's just a normal, quote-unquote, boring life in, Jill's eyes. You still get to talk with people and, hang out with the boss and have fun just experiencing this normal life for someone who is very much not normal in your eyes.
Yeah, I agree. Yet, I still want to confront you on that statement you just did. If anybody has any experience in making drinks to their friends, to themselves, etc., and then have guests come over, and you get served your favorite drink without asking, this is a feeling that Valhalla evokes. Some person knows you good enough to grant you some refreshing drink, be it alcoholic or not, without you asking, because they know you would like it. Those kinds of moments can be related you can relate on those when reading Valhalla. So while you're technically right, not many people have experienced bartending, I don't think bartending is that necessary to relate on that. Just the idea of being able to serve something to somebody else based on your knowledge of their preferences is enough to understand, you just developed a relation with that character and you showcase that. And that's what's relatable about that game, and that hits you deep.
Oh, yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I agree. So, that whole sense of community then, of being friends with them.
Exactly. So that's why, in particular, I love that game. The fact, and it's just amazing, that the game allows you to serve different drink that the people ordered. It's just phenomenal. Because that shows care and attention. Can you, given the character you are, that is a customer behind the bar, can you understand them better that they are currently verbalizing? So, given your past knowledge, given all your interaction, can you serve them the best drink, which might not necessarily be the one they ordered? And that, just the mere fact that it gives you that option is amazing. Just I just love the fact. It's not how well can you create this specific drink given this specific recipe. No, how can you craft the best drink for that person in that specific emotional state right now. Damn it. I love that game.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's nice. Yep. And it's not what people's first thought might be of a slice of life title, but
True.
It hits all the same notes.
Yep. I agree.
Well, on that note, we will be wrapping up today's episode then.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone very much for listening, and I hope you've learned something more about slice of life titles, and I hope you've enjoyed our discussions about it too. So I'm very glad that all of you took the time out of your day to listen. Very appreciated.
Thank you to all the listeners, and goodbye.